stunned. One sentence that rocked the very core of British justice, now triggering a political eruption from the heart of Westminster. Keir Starmer, who had remained silent far too long, has finally broken that silence. But no one was ready for the storm he unleashed. His response wasn't measured or cautious, it was explosive. It shook Parliament, the media, and even his own allies. The Lucy Connelly scandal, once brushed off as a fringe controversy, has now sparked a full-blown political wildfire. And as Starmer's fury echoed through the halls of power, Richard Tice didn't hesitate to strike back, with a vengeance that could reshape British politics. For weeks, the political elite treaded lightly around the Lucy Connelly case. A tweet, a conviction, and a prison sentence that felt more like a warning than justice. Lucy Connelly, a name barely known just weeks ago, suddenly became the symbol of a deeper battle for Britain's identity. Her so-called crime, a tweet labelled as hate speech, followed by a shockingly harsh punishment, more than 2.5 years behind bars. The justice system moved with an urgency and severity that left the public reeling. But silence didn't last. Reform UK's Richard Tice took the spotlight, declaring Lucy Britain's first modern political prisoner. He demanded transparency, action and accountability. At first, the public was divided. But soon, more began to ask the same unsettling question. Was this really justice, or was it political retribution? In the shadows, Keir Starmer, Labour's leader, remained noticeably silent. His statements were vague, his presence remote. It felt like he was waiting for the outrage to fade, but it didn't. It grew louder, the protests swelled, the media turned up the pressure, and finally, under the weight of it all, Starmer snapped, not with regret, but with raw anger. In a closed-door meeting, now leaking to the press, insiders say he was furious. Not only did he defend Lucy's sentence, he lashed out at those who dared question it. According to Labour insiders, Starmer called the backlash a dangerous campaign, threatening the rule of law, and he accused Reform UK of exploiting the issue for political gain. That anger soon burst into the public arena. In a tense press briefing, Starmer delivered what many are calling his most aggressive statement yet. He warned that the UK would not allow masked extremism to hide behind free speech. His tone was cold, sharp, and unapologetic. He doubled down, declaring Lucy's punishment fair and the legal process independent. But what struck people most was what he didn't say. There was no mention of the disturbing reports about Lucy's treatment in prison. No acknowledgement of the rising public unrest. No show of concern or compassion. Only rigid defence of a sentence that now feels, to many, like political overreach. Then came Richard Tice, loud, direct, and unrelenting. Standing in front of a wall of cameras, he fired back. Starmer's not defending justice, he said. He's defending control. He's defending fear. Tice accused the Labour leader of trying to cover up Lucy's suffering, of using the justice system as a political weapon. He argued that Starmer's sudden rage wasn't strength. It was fear. Fear of losing the moral ground. Fear of being exposed. Fear of a system buckling under its own contradictions. Tice's words hit hard. Social media lit up. Thousands rallied again under Lucy Connelly's name. The term political torture began trending. Legal voices joined the debate, questioning the rushed and secretive nature of Lucy's trial. Was her punishment truly about justice, or was it meant to send a chilling message? A message of fear, of silence, of submission. And while Starmer remains defiant in public, the pressure is building, and the cracks within his own party are beginning to show. MPs who once stood behind him began murmuring their doubts. Advisers grew uneasy. The press started digging deeper, and every time Starmer tried to push the story into the background, it only roared back louder. Behind closed doors, Labour insiders reportedly urged Starmer to soften his tone, to show some compassion, but he wouldn't budge. In his view, any sign of empathy could be twisted into weakness. So he stayed the course, firm, unmoving, and unyielding. But in doing so, he may have misjudged the moment. What he believed was strength, the public began to see as coldness. What he presented as justice, more and more people started calling revenge. Now the battle lines are unmistakably drawn. On one side, a government defending a severe sentence in the name of law and order. On the other, a rising political movement, energised by outrage, dissent, and a deepening fear that something vital is slipping away in this country. Freedom, fairness, and the right to speak. At the centre of this storm is Lucy Connelly, locked away, silenced, and now a living symbol of a nation wrestling with its own principles. The fallout from Keir Starmer's eruption over the Lucy Connelly case sent immediate shockwaves through Westminster. Far from calming the controversy, his fierce tone only widened the rift. Newsrooms raced to capture the chaos. Labour frontbenchers, caught off guard by the ferocity of Starmer's outburst, struggled to stay aligned. Some echoed his warnings about the dangers of hate speech, while others looked visibly uneasy. The directive from the top was unmistakable. No compromise, no reconsideration, and no empathy for Lucy Connelly. But public sentiment was shifting, and not in Starmer's favour. Across the UK, the questions grew louder. Was this really about hate speech, or was it about silencing dissent? If the punishment truly fit the crime, why was the government avoiding the issue of Lucy's treatment in prison? Allegations started to circulate, claims that she was being kept in near isolation, subjected to psychological pressure, denied regular contact with her family, and shuffled between prison wings without explanation. At first, these were dismissed as rumours, but slowly the stories gained traction. Prison reform activists and whistleblowers began to suggest that Lucy's treatment was far from ordinary. Starmer said nothing, no denials, no explanations, and no accountability. Richard Tice saw his moment and seized it. With momentum behind the so-called Lucy Bill, he escalated his campaign. He began calling for an emergency parliamentary inquiry, not just into Lucy's sentence, but into how the UK handles freedom of expression more broadly. He asked how many others had faced extreme consequences for voicing controversial or unpopular views. He drew chilling comparisons to authoritarian regimes and asked the one question that echoed across social media and protests. Has the UK gone too far? And this time, people were listening. Support for Lucy swelled. Protests became larger and more organised. Demonstrators gathered outside court buildings, government offices, even the BBC, accusing the mainstream media of deliberately burying her story. Online forums turned into battlegrounds of debate, with tens of thousands weighing in on censorship, political intimidation, and judicial overreach. What once appeared to be the government's principled stance now looked increasingly fragile under the microscope of public scrutiny. Inside Labour, unrest simmered. MPs privately grumbled that Starmer's response to the case was tarnishing the party's reputation. Many feared that Labour was starting to be viewed as authoritarian. Some even suggested that Starmer's legal background had made him blind to the political fallout of supporting such a harsh sentence without nuance or empathy. Still, few dared to speak out publicly, cautious of backlash or being branded as defenders of hate speech. But the silence was both noticeable and damaging. Meanwhile, Richard Tice dominated the media landscape. Interview after interview pushed his narrative deeper into the public psyche. He cast Lucy Connelly not just as a political prisoner, but as a casualty of a broken system, one that punishes dissent while ignoring deeper systemic failures. He accused Starmer of caring more about optics than justice, saying, "You can't govern a country through fear and expect loyalty in return." The message hit home, especially with younger voters and working-class communities, who felt increasingly alienated by the cold, calculated tone of political discourse. The phrase two-tier justice became a rallying cry. Tice and others began spotlighting other cases, many involving violent crimes that ended with far more lenient sentences. The contrast was stark. In one viral case, a man convicted of assault walked free with a suspended sentence, while Lucy, for a tweet, was jailed for over 2 years. The injustice wasn't just seen, it was deeply felt. As public pressure mounted, even media outlets that had once dismissed the controversy started to pay attention. Editorials shifted. Commentators began asking hard, uncomfortable questions. The tide, slowly but steadily, was turning. Despite this, Starmer held firm. In a follow-up speech, he doubled down again, insisting that freedom of expression must always be balanced with public safety and social harmony. He maintained that Lucy's case had followed due legal process, and that political interference would be a dangerous path. But with every statement, the disconnect widened. Starmer spoke of legal standards and abstract principles. The public spoke of fairness, compassion, and the real-world cost of political choices. Then came a new twist, one that added even more weight to the public outcry. A leaked report from inside Lucy's prison detailed her declining health. It described long periods of isolation, a glaring lack of mental health support, and staff allegedly being told not to discuss her case at all. The report didn't confirm outright abuse, but it painted a grim picture, one of neglect, isolation, and indifference. Starmer's camp offered no response. Labour's communications team began declining interviews altogether. Sensing weakness, Richard Tice struck again. At a rally outside the Home Office, he raised the stakes, accusing the government of violating basic human rights. "If they can silence Lucy," he told the crowd, "they can silence you. This isn't just about her, it's about all of us. It's about whether we still live in a democracy or something darker." The crowd erupted in applause. The energy was electric. This wasn't just politics anymore, it had become a movement. As Tice's campaign surged forward, Starmer appeared increasingly isolated. Once hailed as the steady leader Labour needed to rival the Tories, he now seemed rigid, disconnected, and politically exposed. He had gambled that a tough stance would win him points for strength and resolve. Instead, it created a chasm between him and the people he claimed to represent. His supporters insisted he was standing up for the rule of law. But the story taking hold in the public's mind was far more damaging. That Starmer was using the law not to uphold justice, but to shield himself from political misjudgment and moral blindness. Even within the Conservative Party, MPs began to seize the moment. Ministers who had previously stayed clear of the Lucy Connelly case now started quietly calling for a review of hate speech laws. It wasn't out of conviction, it was strategy. They saw what Starmer didn't, that public patience had worn thin, and this case had hit a nerve that couldn't be ignored. Lucy's name, once unknown, had become embedded in the national conversation, not as a criminal, but as a warning, a symbol, a reflection of the fragile state of modern British politics. What began with a single tweet had exploded into something far beyond anyone's control. And the more Starmer resisted, the more people questioned whether justice in the UK still meant what it used to. The Lucy Connelly scandal, now dominating headlines, had spilled far beyond Westminster. What started as a controversial post and a shocking sentence had become a full-blown crisis, one that exposed deep cracks in Britain's institutions. From late-night talk shows to viral TikTok clips, one question kept echoing louder and louder. Is this really justice, or is it control wearing the mask of law? And while Keir Starmer remained defiant in public, behind closed doors at Labour HQ, panic had started to set in. Advisers who had once backed his every move were now divided. Some urged him to stand firm, fearing any backtrack would be seen as weakness. Others warned that his unbending approach was eroding public trust, especially among younger voters and those who cared about civil liberties. Meanwhile, Richard Tice was thriving amid the chaos. What began as a single, sharp criticism had evolved into a full-scale political assault. Each day, he appeared more focused, more forceful, and far more prepared than the traditional parties had expected. His campaign was growing, not just in noise, but in substance. He was now backed by legal experts, civil rights advocates, and even former judges, all questioning not only Lucy's sentence, but the entire system that allowed it. Tice's message had matured. This wasn't just about one woman anymore. This was about reclaiming civil liberties in a democracy that many feared was slipping away. And his audience kept growing. Tens of thousands tuned in to his speeches. Petitions soared past 250,000 signatures. Hashtags like Lucy's All Office and Justice for Speech flooded platforms like X, Instagram, and Facebook. Under mounting pressure, Starmer attempted to seize back control with a televised address. But it wasn't an apology. It was framed as a call for national unity against so-called rising extremism. He claimed the backlash was being fueled by misinformation, fringe political players, and social media hysteria. With a stern expression, he once again doubled down, declaring that no responsible leader could condone speech that incites hatred, no matter the personal or political cost. But his words landed flat. The British public wasn't looking for legal jargon. They were searching for empathy. And that lack of emotional connection was fast becoming the defining trait of Starmer's leadership in the crisis. Then came another blow. Internal leaks from the prison service. Documents and anonymous testimony revealed that Lucy Connelly had been placed in solitary confinement multiple times, despite having no record of violent behaviour. One prison officer, speaking anonymously, called the decision unusual, adding that Lucy had been treated differently from the very beginning. Other reports confirmed the absence of meaningful mental health support, made worse by the intensity of her public vilification and sudden infamy. These revelations unleashed a new wave of outrage across social media. Users began comparing Lucy's harsh treatment to the more lenient handling of violent offenders. The scandal had grown too big for partisan framing. It was no longer just a political controversy. It was becoming a national reckoning. Inside Parliament, tensions reached a boiling point. Backbench MPs from both Labour and the Conservatives began breaking ranks, demanding a formal inquiry into Lucy's trial, sentencing and treatment behind bars. Some called for a review of the judiciary itself. Others focused on revisiting and possibly reforming hate speech laws. A few more cautiously acknowledged that perhaps, just perhaps, this case had crossed a moral line. Yet despite these murmurs of rebellion, Starmer remained firm in public, making only slight tonal shifts. But political analysts warned that his unwillingness to adapt could soon explode into a full-scale disaster. Meanwhile, Richard Tice, now fully aware of the political momentum he had built, took it to the next level. He organised a massive march through London, drawing supporters from every corner of the political map. The turnout shocked Westminster. Estimates placed the crowd at over 100,000. Former police officers, journalists, even ex-Labour donors marched side by side with everyday citizens. Their signs read, "Thoughts aren't crimes. Justice, not vengeance. Who's next?" The energy on the streets was unmistakable. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It had become a battle over identity, liberty, and the growing fear that something essential was slipping away from British society. Inside Labour HQ, the leadership was rattled. The size, passion, and diversity of the protest left them scrambling. Spokespersons were instructed to stop mentioning Lucy Connelly by name. MPs were instructed to stick to vague messaging, talking about maintaining social harmony and resisting division. But those scripted lines only stirred more backlash. Even former Labour-friendly voices in the media began to turn. One headline in The Guardian read, "In defending the system, Starmer is forgetting the people." Meanwhile, Richard Tice was everywhere. Radio, television, podcasts, independent outlets. And everywhere he went, his message stayed the same. This isn't about left or right, it's about right and wrong. International media started picking up the story. Outlets across Europe and the US ran headlines questioning the UK's commitment to free speech. Human rights groups began weighing in. Amnesty International formally requested a government response to Lucy's prison conditions. Yet from Downing Street, nothing. No comment, no explanation, no change in tone. Starmer's team seemed to believe silence would make the storm pass. But it did the opposite. Now the UK was under a global spotlight. Starmer's approval ratings began to dip. Focus groups described him as cold, authoritarian, disconnected. For a man once praised for being measured and legal-minded, those traits were now dragging him down. His critics painted him as distant from real people's struggles. His allies feared they were witnessing a slow-motion political collapse. And through it all, Lucy Connelly remained behind bars. Her legal team filed an appeal, arguing the sentence was excessive and the treatment inhumane. Tice raised funds for her defence and vowed to fight the case to the very end. Meanwhile, public support for the Lucy Bill surged. More and more people were calling for new laws to ensure that no citizen could be jailed for expressing views, no matter how controversial, without overwhelming justification. The ground beneath Westminster was shifting. The political elite, long used to containing public outrage with media spin and party loyalty, now faced something far bigger, an organic, unpredictable wave of dissent. And it wasn't coming from one ideology or one group. It came from parents, students, retirees, professionals, people who had never protested before, who had never raised their voices, until they saw their own freedom reflected in Lucy's fate. And as that wave built, one truth became impossible to ignore. Keir Starmer had misjudged the moment. In trying to appear strong, he failed to appear human. In defending the rule of law, he forgot the people that law was supposed to protect. Now, with a nation watching and a movement rising, one question looms. How long can he hold the line before it breaks? If you're as shocked by this as we are, don't stay silent. Share this video now to spread the truth before it's buried. Subscribe to the channel for more breaking updates the mainstream media won't show you. Hit like if you believe Lucy Connelly deserves justice. Comment below, do you think Starmer has gone too far? Your voice matters, now more than ever. Join the conversation, stand up for real democracy.